Invisible again, Eliza Wilson thought, pressing herself against the mahogany paneling of Howard Stark's study as Victoria Pierce swept past without a glance, Chanel No. 5 lingering in her wake. 23 years of this, of existing in the periphery of the Stark family's vision, a human fixture as overlooked as the antique grandfather clock that had witnessed 3 generations of wealth and power. The weight of her starched uniform felt suddenly suffocating as the family gathered for the reading of Howard's will. She adjusted the silver serving tray in her hands, catching her reflection in its polished surface. 42 years old, her beauty subtle and unadorned, her intelligence carefully concealed behind downcast eyes. She was just the Black Maid until the moment Edward Rochester cleared his throat and shattered her carefully constructed world with a single sentence. To the woman you all call the Maid, everything you see belongs to her. Eliza's fingers tightened around the silver tray, the metal suddenly cold against her skin despite the warmth of the room. The weight of every hostile gaze in Howard Stark's study pressed against her like a physical assault. She could hear Victoria Pierce's diamond bracelet, the one Howard had given her for her 40th birthday, scraping against the leather armchair as the woman's hand clenched into a fist. "This is preposterous," Victoria hissed, her voice like shattered crystal. Father was not in his right mind. That woman has been manipulating him, Edward interrupted, his expression unreadable behind wire-rimmed glasses. The afternoon light through the study windows cast his face in golden shadows. "Miss Pierce, I assure you, your father was of perfectly sound mind when he made these arrangements." 3 years ago, Eliza felt her heart hammering beneath her uniform, each beat carrying decades of silenced words and swallowed pride. The tray trembled in her grip, fine Limoges china rattling like her carefully constructed persona, both on the verge of shattering. A memory surfaced unbidden. 4-year-old Peter crawling in her lap after a nightmare, his small body trembling against hers as she hummed her mother's lullaby. "Why can't you be my mommy?" he had whispered, and she had felt her heart break for all they both had lost. Victoria had been in Paris that week, at Fashion Week with Lawrence. Howard Sr. had been too busy to notice his grandson's tears. She caught young Peter's eye across the room now, the only person not looking at her with naked hatred or confusion. Just wonder, and something like recognition dawning in those eyes, so like his grandfather's. For 17 years, she had poured his cereal, bandaged his scraped knees, and whispered encouragement when his mother was too busy with charity galas to attend his science competitions. The secret warmth in their shared glances had been her only solace in this cold mansion where antiques worth millions surrounded people who couldn't see the value of the humans serving them. The scent of Howard's favorite bourbon still lingered in the air, as if his ghost watched this unfolding drama from his favorite leather chair. 3 days dead, and already they were tearing at each other like wolves. Victoria rose to her feet, designer heels digging into the Persian rug. "I demand to know what kind of hold this servant had over my father. What did you do to him?" She advanced on Eliza, pearls gleaming at her throat like teeth. What kind of woman worms her way into an old man's will? Behind Victoria's rage, Eliza glimpsed something else, fear, not just of losing her inheritance, but of losing control of a narrative Victoria had carefully maintained for decades. "The kind born with his blood," Edward said quietly. The tray slipped from Eliza's fingers, crashing against the hardwood floor with a sound like a gunshot. Fine bone china shattered, tea spreading across polished oak like spilled blood. "Hello, my lovelies at Ducal Tales. I hope you're settling in for a story that's been simmering in my heart. Where are you watching from today? If you haven't already, consider subscribing to join our Ducal family for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat." In the terrible silence that followed the lawyer's words, Victoria's face transformed from rage to something far worse, recognition. She staggered back, hand flying to cover her mouth. "No," she whispered. "It can't be. Father would never have." "The DNA test results are included in the documentation," Edward continued, removing a sealed envelope from his briefcase. along with a letter Mr. Stark left for his firstborn daughter. From a corner, James Stark, Howard's nephew and head of security for Stark Industries, exchanged a loaded glance with Lawrence Pierce, Victoria's brother. James's hand drifted toward the inside of his tailored jacket, a gesture Eliza had seen too many times when Howard discussed sensitive business matters. Eliza couldn't move, couldn't breathe. After 23 years of invisibility, of careful silence, of watching and waiting, she stood revealed. But as her eyes met Peter's across the suddenly airless room, a single thought crystallized with terrifying clarity. If Howard had finally told the truth about her identity, what other secrets had died with him? And why did the old man's last words to her still echo in her mind like a warning? "Watch the boy, Eliza. They're coming for him now." Her gaze drifted to the bookshelf, where Howard kept his most treasured possessions, including a photograph of himself with Daniel Draper, his former head of security, receiving a military commendation. The man Howard had trusted most, until he'd mysteriously dismissed him 2 years ago. Eliza sat alone in the servants' quarters that evening, Howard's letter unopened in her trembling hands. Rain pelted against the small window of the room she'd called home for over 2 decades, a space deliberately humble despite the mansion's grandeur. She had chosen this life of self-imposed modesty, accepted invisibility as her armor. Now that armor lay in pieces at her feet. She ran her fingers over the heavy cream envelope, tracing the elegant script that spelled her true name, Elizabeth Amelia Stark. Not Wilson. Never Wilson. That had been her mother's name, Josephine Wilson, the beautiful black pianist Howard had loved during his first marriage. The woman who died giving birth to a daughter the world was never meant to know about. "He could have acknowledged me at any time," she whispered to the empty room. The bitter words hung in the air, mingling with the scent of lemon furniture polish and the lavender sachets she kept in her drawers, small comforts in a life of service. 23 years of scrubbing his floors, serving his family, watching his grandson grow up calling me Miss Eliza, while I called him Master Peter. Her small dresser held the only photograph she possessed of her mother, hidden beneath carefully folded uniforms. Josephine at her piano, head thrown back in laughter, dark curls tumbling over her shoulders. Howard had given her the photo on her 18th birthday, the only time he'd ever spoken directly about Josephine. She was magnificent, he'd told Eliza, and they would have destroyed her if they knew about you. Just like they'll destroy you if they find out. "This world isn't ready, Eliza. It may never be." A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She quickly hid the letter beneath her pillow before opening the door. Peter stood in the hallway, his lanky, 17-year-old frame awkward and uncertain. Howard's eyes stared back at her from a face still caught between boyhood and the man he would become. "Miss Eliza," he said, then stopped, correcting himself. Should I call you Aunt Eliza now?" The simple question made her throat tighten. "I don't know what you should call me, Peter." He shifted his weight, hands jammed into the pockets of jeans that cost more than Eliza's monthly salary. "Can I come in? Everyone upstairs is." He trailed off. Plotting my demise? The corner of her mouth twitched. Mom broke a Waterford crystal vase against the wall. The ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Uncle James is on the phone with his lawyer and just made a call to someone he only referred to as D. Aunt Rosalind is drinking herself into a stupor while claiming she always knew there was something different about you. And Uncle Lawrence keeps saying you must have." He blushed. "Seduced your grandfather?" Eliza supplied. "That would be quite a trick, considering I was barely 7 when I came to live here." She stepped aside, allowing Peter into the small room. He'd never been down here before, she realized. This was the invisible part of his world, the spaces where people like her disappeared to when not actively serving his family. Peter glanced around, taking in the neat, Spartan quarters with wide eyes. "I never thought about where you lived," he admitted. "I just thought you appeared when we needed you." That was rather the point. He sat on the edge of her bed, hands clasped between his knees. "Why didn't he ever tell us? All those years, you were his daughter, and he made you serve us." Eliza leaned against the dresser, arms crossed protectively across her chest. Your grandfather was many things, Peter. Brave wasn't one of them. But he cared about you. He must have. Peter's eyes held a desperate need to believe in his grandfather's goodness. You were always the one he spoke to differently. The one he looked for when he came home. In his way. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Howard believed he was protecting me by hiding me in plain sight. The powerful men he dealt with, the sort who built their fortunes alongside him, they wouldn't have accepted his black daughter. And your grandmother, she would have made sure I disappeared completely. Peter's eyes widened. Grandma Eleanor knew about you. Eleanor Stark was willing to forgive her husband's affair. A mixed-race child was a different matter entirely. Eliza's voice hardened. When your grandfather brought me here after my mother died, it was with the understanding that I would never claim his name. I would be raised among the servants, educated quietly, and kept close but separate. Your grandmother demanded it. Understanding dawned on Peter's face. That's why you were the only servant she was ever nice to. She was keeping her enemies closer. Eliza nodded, impressed by his perception. She died believing I'd kept my part of the bargain. And now grandfather's broken it for you. Peter leaned forward. But why now? Why did he change his will? A memory flashed through Eliza's mind. Howard in his study, frantically searching through files after a heated argument with James 3 months ago, muttering about security protocols and calling someone named Daniel repeatedly with no answer. The next morning, Howard had looked at her with new intensity, asking her to personally prepare all his meals from then on. I only trust you, he'd said. Your grandfather was afraid, Eliza said softly. Not for himself, but for you. Before she could elaborate, a sharp knock at the door made them both jump. Edward Rochester stood in the hallway, his usual composed demeanor fractured by obvious tension. Ms. Stark, he said, pointedly using her true name, there's been a development. The family is demanding an emergency hearing to contest the will. And he hesitated, glancing at Peter. There have been threats. I don't think either of you should stay in this house tonight. Peter stood. Threats? Against Eliza? Edward's gaze was steady. Against both of you. Your grandfather was very specific in his instructions to me. Where he left his money is only part of what he revealed in that will. He nodded toward the letter, still hidden beneath Eliza's pillow. You need to read that. Now. And then we need to leave. Through the open door, Eliza caught a glimpse of Victoria in the main hallway. Phone pressed her ear, voice low and urgent. It's happening now, she was saying. No, he doesn't know yet, but she does. I can see it in her eyes. Victoria looked up, catching Eliza's gaze, her perfectly composed face revealing a flash of something cold and calculating before she turned away. Eliza felt the weight of Howard's secrets pressing down on her. All these years, she'd watched over Peter from the shadows, serving meals, cleaning rooms, being the invisible guardian her father had asked her to be. She'd buried her resentment, her dreams, her own identity, all while loving this boy who never knew they shared the same blood. What else did the will say, Edward? She asked quietly. The lawyer's expression was grim. That Peter is the sole heir to Stark Industries. Not through his mother Victoria, as everyone assumed, but through his father. Peter's face went pale. But my father was Howard Stark Jr., Edward finished. Your grandfather's only son, who supposedly died before you were born. Victoria has been lying to you, Peter. She was never Howard's daughter. She was his daughter-in-law. As the implications sank in, Eliza finally understood the full weight of her father's deathbed warning. She wasn't just Howard's secret daughter anymore. She was the only person left alive who could protect his true heir. The rain had intensified to a torrential downpour by the time Edward's sleek black Audi pulled away from the Stark estate. Eliza watched the mansion's lights recede in the side mirror, the grand Tudor-style home shrinking until it disappeared into the stormy night. 23 years of her life, vanishing into darkness. The car's interior smelled of expensive leather and Edward's sandalwood cologne, now mingling with the scent of fear, sour and unmistakable. Through the rain-streaked windows, the gleaming streetlights blurred into golden halos, casting everything in a dreamlike glow that belied the nightmare unfolding around them. "They've frozen the accounts," Edward said, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Victoria moved quickly. "By morning, you won't be able to access any of the Stark holdings until this is resolved in court." In the back seat, Peter stared silently out the window, the revelation about his parentage rendering him uncharacteristically quiet. Eliza reached across the seat to touch his hand, but he pulled away. "You knew," he said flatly. "All this time, you knew who my father really was." "Yes." There was no point in lying now. "And my mother? Is Victoria even?" "She's your biological mother," Eliza confirmed. "Victoria Pierce was a model when Howard Jr. met her. Your father fell hard for her, against your grandfather's wishes. They married secretly. So grandfather disapproved of his son's wife the same way he hid you? What was wrong with our family?" "Howard Stark built an empire by controlling everything around him," Edward interjected, catching Peter's eyes in the rearview mirror. "Including his family secrets. You were the only one who ever," Peter's voice caught. "All those science fairs Mom was too busy for, all those nightmares after Dad supposedly died. You were always there. Not Victoria. Not grandfather. You." The raw emotion in his voice made Eliza's chest ache. "I wanted to tell you so many times. Is that why you taught me to play piano? Because your mother was a pianist?" Eliza nodded, surprised he'd made the connection. "I thought some part of our shared heritage should be passed on, even if you didn't know why." Peter fell silent, processing this new understanding of their bond. Eliza finally pulled Howard's letter from her pocket. The envelope felt heavier now, laden with 2 decades of buried truths. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal. Howard's handwriting was strong, decisive, much like the man himself. "My dearest Elizabeth, if you're reading this, I have failed to protect you as I promised your mother I would. For that, I am sorry. Not a day passed that I didn't regret the choice I made to hide you rather than proudly claim you as my own. Fear makes cowards of even the most powerful men. What I tell you now will place an unfair burden on your shoulders, but you are the only one I trust with the truth. Howard Jr. did not die in an accident, as the world believes. He discovered financial irregularities in the company, evidence of weapons being sold to terrorist organizations through shell corporations. When he threatened to expose the operation, he was murdered. I could never prove who was responsible, but I know it was orchestrated by someone within our family. The same person who has been slowly poisoning me for months, believing I remained ignorant of their betrayal. Peter is the rightful heir to everything, but they will come for him next. The empire I built is worth billions, and my grandson stands in the way of whoever killed his father. I've left everything to you because you're the only one who ever loved that boy without agenda. Protect him, Elizabeth, and when the time is right, help him reclaim what is his. There is one man you can trust, Daniel Draper. He was my head of security before I was forced to dismiss him when he got too close to the truth about Howard Jr.'s death. Find him. He has the evidence your brother collected. I have loved you imperfectly, but I have loved you always. Your father, Howard." Eliza's hands trembled as she folded the letter. "Edward, did you know about this?" The lawyer's eyes remained fixed on the rain-slicked road. "I knew only that Howard suspected foul play in his son's death. The rest," he shook his head. "He kept compartmentalized. For everyone's protection. Daniel Draper, the security chief in the photo on grandfather's bookshelf?" Peter asked. "Mom always said he was fired for stealing company secrets." "Stealing or discovering them," Eliza murmured. "We need to find him." "Already arranged," Edward replied. "He's meeting us at a safe house upstate." Howard made sure we had contingency plans. He's been suspicious since he found traces of arsenic in his blood tests 3 months ago. The mention of poison sent a chill through Eliza. She recalled Lawrence's pharmaceutical connections, James's access to the entire estate, Rosalind's background in chemistry, and Victoria's desperate need to maintain control. Any of them could have slowly been killing Howard while smiling across the dinner table. As they crossed the George Washington Bridge, leaving Manhattan behind, Eliza's phone chimed with a text message. The number was unfamiliar. Initial toxicology results confirm arsenic poisoning. Someone's erased the security footage from the estate for the past 6 months. Watch your back. Dr. Simmons. Dr. Olivia Simmons, Howard's personal physician and the only person he'd trusted to conduct his private autopsy. The confirmation sent a chill through Eliza's body. "What is it?" Peter asked, noticing her expression. Before she could answer, the rear window exploded inward in a shower of glass and rain. Edward swerved violently, the Audi fishtailing across the wet pavement. "Get down," he shouted. Through the spiderweb glass of the side window, Eliza caught a glimpse of a black SUV, gaining on them, its headlights off. A silhouette leaned out the passenger window, the unmistakable outline of a gun visible against the night sky. Another shot cracked through the night air. Edward's body jerked forward, blood spraying across the windshield in a fine crimson mist. The car careened toward the guardrail. Eliza lunged for the steering wheel, but it was too late. The Audi smashed through the barrier, momentarily airborne before plunging toward the dark Hudson waters below. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. Cold water rushed in through the shattered windows as the car began to sink. Beside her, Peter was struggling with his seatbelt, panic etched across his face. Edward hung motionless over the steering wheel, his blood turning the incoming water a murky pink. "Peter!" She fought against her own belt, the frigid water already past her waist. The windows kick out the rest of the glass. They had seconds, not minutes. The car was sinking fast, nose down in the dark river. With desperate strength, Eliza braced herself against the front seat and kicked at her window until the remaining glass gave way. The river surged in faster. "Edward's dead," Peter choked out, finally free of his belt. "You first," she ordered, helping push him through the window. "Swim up and away from the car." As Peter disappeared into the murky water, Eliza took one final breath before the cabin filled completely. She pulled herself through the window, the current immediately threatening to drag her down with the sinking vehicle. Her lungs burned as she fought her way to the surface, the weight of her clothes trying to pull her back to the riverbed. When she finally broke through to air, gasping and choking, she couldn't see Peter anywhere. "Peter!" she screamed, spinning in the water. The bridge lights reflected off the churning surface, but there was no sign of the boy. "Peter!" Strong arms suddenly closed around her from behind. She struggled wildly until a deep voice spoke near her ear. "I've got you. Stop fighting or we'll both go under." The man's powerful stroke pulled them toward the shore, away from where emergency lights were already gathering on the bridge. As they neared the bank, Eliza caught sight of Peter huddled on the rocky shoreline, a tall figure standing protectively beside him. Her rescuer helped her onto solid ground, where she collapsed, coughing up river water. When she could finally focus, she found herself staring up at a ruggedly handsome face, dark eyes assessing her with professional intensity. "Elizabeth Stark?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. She nodded, still struggling to catch her breath. "Daniel Draper," he introduced himself, former head of security for Stark Industries. He glanced toward the bridge, where police lights now flashed. "And if someone just tried to kill you, we need to move. Now." Recognition flickered through Eliza. The same face from Howard's photograph, though older now, with a scar running along his jawline that hadn't been there before. "How did you?" she began. "I've been watching the mansion since Howard died." Daniel helped her to her feet, his hand steady under her elbow. "Edward texted me when you left. I followed, keeping my distance. Good thing I did." Peter stumbled toward them, soaking wet and shivering. "They killed Edward," he said, shock evident in his voice. "They try to kill us." Daniel's expression hardened. "And they'll try again." He looked directly at Eliza. "Howard told me if anything happened to him, I should protect you and the boy at all costs. But I need to know, are you in? Because from this moment, your old life is gone. You're not the maid anymore." Eliza stared at the bridge where Edward Rochester had just died protecting them, at the boy she'd watched over since infancy, at this stranger Howard had trusted with their lives. The choice crystallized before her with stark clarity. She could run, disappear with whatever money she had, and leave the Stark legacy and its deadly secrets behind. Or she could become the daughter Howard had finally acknowledged, and fight for the nephew who'd never known they shared the same blood. In the distance, sirens wailed. They had minutes at most. "I'm in," she said, drawing herself up despite her dripping clothes and the chill setting into her bones. "But understand this. I'm not doing this for Howard or his empire. I'm doing it for Peter." Daniel nodded once, respect flickering in his eyes. "Then we need to disappear before whoever's up there." He gestured toward the bridge, realizes you survived. As they hurried toward a nondescript SUV parked in shadows, Eliza felt the weight of Howard's letter against her heart. For 23 years, she'd lived in the margins of the Stark family, watching and waiting, always the servant, never the heir. Now, in the space of a single day, she had become both guardian and avenger. And someone the family wanted her dead for it. Dawn broke over the small cabin nestled in the Catskills, painting the weathered wooden walls with pale golden light. Eliza stood at the window, a steaming mug of coffee warming her hands as she watched Daniel check the perimeter for the third time since they'd arrived. In the 12 hours since their escape from the bridge, he'd barely rested, his vigilance a constant reminder of the danger still hunting them. The coffee's rich aroma mingled with the scent of pine and morning dew seeping through the cabin's old wooden bones. She noticed how Daniel moved, fluid yet precise, his eyes constantly scanning, occasionally touching the scar along his jawline when deep in thought, a habit that seemed almost rehearsed, as if he'd studied what traumatized operatives should look like. Inside the modest safe house, Peter slept on a worn leather couch, his face finally peaceful after hours of nightmares that had him calling out for Edward, for his father, and once, in a way that broke Eliza's heart, for his mother. "He'll need time," Daniel said quietly, stepping through the door and locking it behind him. He moved with the controlled precision of someone trained to anticipate threats from any direction. Finding out your whole life is built on lies. It changes how you see everything. Eliza turned from the window. "Speaking from experience?" A shadow crossed Daniel's face, then disappeared too quickly, like an actor who'd momentarily forgotten his role. "Afghanistan taught me that. Howard brought me into Stark Industries because we shared that understanding." He poured himself coffee, the morning light illuminating a web of scars across his knuckles. "You look like her, you know. Josephine." Eliza stilled. "You knew my mother?" "I was young security detail at a few concerts where she played. Howard was there every night, front row." Daniel's expression softened with the memory. "The way he looked at her, that's how I knew something was wrong when Howard Jr. died." Howard didn't look devastated. He looked terrified, like he had when he realized Josephine's pregnancy had complications. The revelation that this stranger knew more about her parents' relationship than she did created an unexpected ache in Eliza's chest. "He never told me anything about them together," she admitted. "Just that one photograph and a few cryptic comments." Howard compartmentalized everything, especially his heart. Daniel set his mug down and pulled a laptop from his bag. "We need to review what we know. The family will report you and Peter missing soon, if they haven't already." Before he could open the computer, Peter stirred, sitting up with the disoriented look of someone waking in an unfamiliar place. For a moment, hope flashed across his face. Then reality crashed back, and Eliza watched his shoulders slump under its weight. "They'll say we killed Edward," he said, his voice rough from sleep. "They'll blame us for everything." "Probably," Daniel agreed without sugarcoating. "James has deep connections with the NYPD." "James," Eliza murmured. He was on the phone immediately after the will reading. "James Stark has been running Howard's security division for the past 2 years, since I was forced out," Daniel said, opening his laptop. He also controlled all of Howard's medical appointments in the final months. "Easy access for poisoning," Peter concluded, standing to join them at the small kitchen table. His perceptiveness reminded Eliza of his father. Howard Jr. had possessed the same quick, analytical mind. Daniel nodded. But Victoria Pierce had the strongest financial motive. If you're revealed as the legitimate heir, Peter, she loses control of her Stark Industries shares. She's been acting as your proxy. And Uncle Lawrence has always been desperate for cash, Peter added. His pharmaceutical company is drowning in debt. Mom complains about having to bail him out constantly. Eliza thought of Lawrence Pierce's constant hovering around Howard, always ready with a new breakthrough supplement the old man should try. What about Rosalind? She asked. Howard's sister had always been the family wild card, floating on the periphery with her ever-present cocktail and sharp-tongued observations. Rosalind Stark Hamilton, Daniel said, pulling up a financial report on his screen. Officially, she's broke, spent her trust fund years ago. Unofficially, she's been receiving monthly payments from an offshore account connected to a defense contractor that Stark Industries blacklisted 5 years ago. So everyone had a motive, Peter said glumly. Great, including people we haven't identified yet, Daniel cautioned. Howard Jr. uncovered something big before he died, weapons deals that implicated people beyond the family. Eliza finally asked the question that had been haunting her since reading Howard's letter. Howard Jr.'s accident. Was it really murder? Daniel's expression darkened. The boat explosion that supposedly killed him was professionally done. What nobody knows is that Howard Jr. contacted me the night before. He said he had evidence that would bring down half the board. We were supposed to meet, but he never showed. So whoever killed Dad could be the same person who poisoned Grandfather and tried to kill us, Peter said, connecting the dots. And they've had 17 years to bury the evidence, Daniel confirmed. A notification on Daniel's laptop interrupted them, a news alert. He clicked it, and a reporter's voice filled the cabin. Breaking news from the Stark family. Victoria Pierce, daughter of the late Howard Stark, has announced that her son Peter Pierce has been kidnapped by a former housemaid who was recently fired for theft. The woman, identified as Eliza Wilson, allegedly attacked the family lawyer Edward Rochester and abducted the 17-year-old heir after being excluded from Stark's will. Police are treating this as a possible hostage situation. The screen showed Eliza's employee ID photo next to a school portrait of Peter. Victoria stood at a podium, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face as she pleaded for her son's safe return. She's good, Daniel muttered. Always was. Peter stared at the screen, his mother's performance rendering him speechless. Eliza reached for his hand, and this time he didn't pull away. She's making sure the whole world is looking for us, Eliza said. While painting you as the villain, Daniel added. Classic misdirection. Peter's fingers tightened around Eliza's. I need to know everything, he said. About my father, about what he found, about why they killed him. His voice cracked. About why my mother has been lying to me my entire life. Daniel closed the laptop. I have some of Howard Jr.'s files in a secure location, but getting to them won't be easy. Every law enforcement agency in the state will be looking for you both now. So, we need a disguise, Eliza said practically. Her years of invisible service had taught her one valuable lesson. People saw what they expected to see, and a story that gets us close to the evidence without raising suspicion. Daniel studied her with new respect. I might have something that could work, but it's risky. It would mean going back into the city, specifically to Stark Tower. That's insane, Peter protested. That's the first place they'll look for us. Which makes it the last place they'll expect us to go, Eliza countered. She'd spent her life being underestimated, overlooked. Perhaps that could finally become an advantage. What's at Stark Tower that we need? Howard Jr.'s private server, Daniel explained. He kept a mirrored backup of everything he discovered in a hidden subsystem that only he could access. I helped him set it up when he first became suspicious. And you think it's still there after 17 years? Peter asked skeptically. Howard Sr. never let anyone dismantle his son's office after the accident. It became a kind of shrine, off limits to everyone. Daniel's expression softened. He kept hoping his son would somehow walk back through that door. A knock at the cabin door froze them all in place. Daniel immediately drew a gun from his waistband, motioning for Eliza and Peter to move away from the windows. Expecting anyone, Eliza whispered. Daniel shook his head, positioning himself strategically by the door. No one knows about this place except... Daniel? It's Olivia. Let me in before someone sees me. Eliza recognized the name, Dr. Olivia Simmons, Howard's physician who had confirmed the poisoning. Daniel checked through the peephole before quickly unlocking the door. Dr. Simmons hurried inside, carrying a medical bag and looking over her shoulder. She was a striking woman in her 50s, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun, her movements efficient and precise. "They're watching my apartment," she said without preamble. "James Stark sent men to escort me to a family meeting." I slipped out the back. She surveyed the room, eyes settling on Eliza and Peter. "Good, you're both alive. The news is saying otherwise." "What news?" Daniel demanded, securing the door. "They found Edward's car and body. The official story is that Eliza killed him, kidnapped Peter, and is now on the run." Dr. Simmons opened her bag, removing a sealed evidence envelope. "I brought Howard's complete toxicology report. The poison was administered over months, in his evening bourbon, most likely. Professional job, nearly untraceable." "Nearly?" Eliza prompted. "It's a compound developed for military application. Very rare, very expensive. I only recognized it because..." She hesitated. "Because..." Daniel pressed. "Because it was the same compound found in Howard Jr.'s system after his boating accident. Traces were in the few tissue samples recovered." Peter sank into a chair. "So, it's definitely the same killer." "Yes, but that's not all." Dr. Simmons pulled a small flash drive from her pocket. "Howard asked me to run DNA verification on something 6 months ago. He wouldn't tell me what it was for, but..." She looked directly at Peter. "It was a paternity test comparing your DNA with Howard Jr.'s. Confirming I'm really his son," Peter said. "Not exactly." Dr. Simmons glanced uncomfortably at Eliza. "The test confirmed you are Howard Jr.'s biological child, but it also revealed something Howard found deeply disturbing. There was genetic anomaly that suggested consanguinity." Daniel's expression darkened. "In English, Olivia." "The test indicated that Peter's mother is closely related to Howard Jr." Dr. Simmons met Eliza's eyes. "Victoria Pierce is Howard Jr.'s half-sister. They share a father." The revelation dropped like a bomb in the small cabin. Eliza felt the blood drain from her face as she realized the implications. "That's not possible," Peter whispered, horror creeping into his voice. "That would mean..." "Your mother is Howard Sr.'s daughter from another relationship," Dr. Simmons confirmed. "And she conceived a child with her half-brother, possibly without him knowing they were related. Or possibly with full knowledge," Daniel added grimly. "Which would explain why Howard Jr. suddenly became determined to expose family secrets. He might have discovered his wife was actually his sister." Eliza watched Peter struggle to process this new revelation, each piece of information more devastating than the last. She moved to his side, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. "This changes nothing about who you are," she told him firmly, "but might explain why Victoria is so desperate to keep control of everything, including the narrative of your father's death." Dr. Simmons checked her watch nervously. "I need to get back before they realize I've gone off-grid. They're watching all of Howard's associates." "You shouldn't have come," Daniel said. "It was too dangerous." "Howard saved my career once," she replied simply. "I owed him this." She handed the flash drive to Eliza. "Everything's on here. The toxicology, the DNA results, my suspicions. Be careful who you trust with it." After Dr. Simmons left, a heavy silence fell over the cabin. Peter sat motionless, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. "We need to move," Daniel finally said, already packing his equipment. "This location is compromised if Olivia was followed." Eliza knelt in front of Peter. "I know this is overwhelming, but we need to keep going for your father, for Howard, for the truth." "What if the truth is that I shouldn't exist?" Peter whispered, voicing the fear that had been building since the revelation about his parents. "If my mother and father are..." He couldn't finish the sentence. Eliza took his hands firmly in hers. "You're not defined by how you came into this world. You're defined by what you choose to do with the life you have." Peter looked up, his eyes haunted but determined. "I want to see my father's office at Stark Tower. Whatever he found, whatever made him a target. I need to know." Daniel nodded approvingly, though something flickered behind his eyes when Peter mentioned the office. Anticipation, perhaps, rather than concern. We'll need to change appearances, create cover identities. I spent my life being invisible, Eliza said, straightening up with new resolve. I think it's time I learned how to hide in plain sight. As they prepared to leave, Eliza caught Daniel watching her with an unreadable expression. What? She asked. Howard told me once that his greatest regret was hiding you away, he said quietly. He said you had more intelligence and strength than anyone in his family. I think he was right. The unexpected compliment warmed something in Eliza that had been cold for too long. He should have told me himself. We rarely tell the people we care about what they mean to us until it's too late, Daniel replied, a hint of personal regret coloring his words. He hesitated, then added, Howard also said you were the only one he trusted to protect Peter if things went wrong. I've been protecting him his whole life, Eliza said. The difference is, now I'm doing it as his aunt, not his maid. Peter joined them, a backpack slung over his shoulder and a new determination in his stance. No more secrets, he said. Whatever we find at Stark Tower, we face it together. As they loaded the SUV, Eliza caught sight of a news helicopter in the distance, slowly sweeping the area in a search pattern. Their brief sanctuary was coming to an end. The hunt had begun in earnest. And this time, Eliza wasn't running from the truth. She was running toward it, with the last true Stark heir by her side and a man her father had trusted as their only ally. The invisible Maid had vanished. In her place stood a woman ready to claim not just her name, but justice for 2 generations of Stark men who had died protecting a truth that could destroy an empire. Stark Tower loomed against the Manhattan skyline like a monolith of glass and steel, its upper floors disappearing into low-hanging clouds. 3 days after their escape from the bridge, Eliza stood in its shadow, nearly unrecognizable in a tailored charcoal pantsuit, her hair straightened and pulled back in a severe bun, designer glasses perched on her nose. Beside her, Peter had been transformed with temporary hair dye, colored contacts, and the confident posture Daniel had drilled into him. Remember, you're not Peter Pierce today, Daniel reminded him through the nearly invisible earpiece they each wore. You're Alex Chun, college intern shadowing Dr. Rebecca Hill from the compliance department. Eliza adjusted her visitor badge. Rebecca Hill, compliance audit printed beneath a photograph Daniel had doctored. And you're sure the real Rebecca Hill won't be showing up? She's presenting at a conference in Chicago until tomorrow. Daniel confirmed from his position in a service van half a block away, monitoring the building's security feeds he'd managed to hack. Her credentials will get you to the executive floor, but Howard Jr.'s office is in the private wing. You'll need the key card I gave you for that. Eliza felt the weight of the stolen access card in her pocket. Daniel had obtained it through channels he refused to disclose, a reminder that the former security chief operated in a world with flexible definitions of legality. And you're certain the surveillance in that wing is still on the old system? She asked. Positive. Howard Sr. never let anyone upgrade it, said it was a memorial to his son. I'll loop the feed once you're inside, but you'll have 20 minutes max before someone might notice. Eliza took a deep breath, centering herself. Ready? Peter nodded, though his eyes betrayed his nervousness. Let's go find out what got my father killed. The lobby of Stark Industries was a cathedral to corporate power, soaring ceilings, marble floors, and a massive sculpture of interlocking gears representing the company's engineering roots. Security was tight but predictable. Daniel had prepared them for every checkpoint. Compliance audit, Eliza explained coolly to the guard, sliding over Rebecca Hill's credentials. Mr. Stark's death has triggered a full review of executive-level protocols. And the kid? The guard eyed Peter skeptically. Summer internship program. He's shadowing me today. Eliza's tone conveyed that she found the arrangement as inconvenient as the guard did. Moments later, they were ascending in a glass elevator, the city spreading out beneath them like a living map. You're good at this, Peter murmured, watching her transformation from the woman who had served him breakfast for years into someone who commanded instant respect. The authority, the confidence. I've spent my life observing powerful people, Eliza replied quietly. How they move, how they speak, how the world bends around them. A hint of bitterness crept into her voice. It's easier than you might think to become what you've watched your whole life. The elevator opened onto the executive floor, a hushed sanctuary of wealth and influence. Assistants moved with purpose between offices, barely glancing at the compliance auditor and her intern. Eliza led them confidently down the main corridor, then turned into a less trafficked hallway marked Executive Archives. Almost there, Daniel's voice confirmed in their earpieces. Security cameras looping now. You're invisible for the next 20 minutes. At the end of the hall stood a frosted glass door with a simple nameplate, Howard Stark, Jr., Executive VP. The sight of it made Peter falter. My father worked here every day, he whispered. Walked through this door, not knowing someone wanted him dead. Eliza squeezed his arm reassuringly before swiping the keycard. The lock clicked, and they slipped inside. The office was a time capsule, frozen in 2008, the year of Howard Jr.'s death. Framed engineering patents lined one wall, a half-empty coffee mug still sat on the desk, and a calendar showed appointments never kept. Dust covered everything in a thin veil, undisturbed except for a single path that led to the computer terminal. Someone's been here recently, Eliza observed, noting the clean trail through the dust. Probably Howard Sr., Daniel suggested through the earpiece. He visited every year on the anniversary. Peter moved to the desk, running his fingers over the surface. This is surreal, he said softly. I've seen photos of my father, heard stories, but this is the first time I've felt like he was a real person. Eliza turned to the computer. Daniel, where would the hidden server access be? Under the desk, there's a biometric scanner disguised as a power outlet. Howard Jr. modified it to respond to his DNA signature, or anyone sharing enough genetic markers. Peter knelt down, finding the fake outlet. So me? That's the theory, Daniel confirmed. Press your thumb against it. If Howard Jr. set it up the way I think he did, your DNA should be close enough to trigger the access protocol. Peter hesitated only briefly before pressing his thumb against the scanner. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a soft click came from behind the bookcase, which slid sideways to reveal a hidden alcove containing a second computer setup. I'm in, Peter breathed, moving toward the hidden workstation. 15 minutes left, Daniel warned. The hidden computer sprang to life at Peter's touch, bypassing login screens to reveal an index of encrypted files. Peter's fingers flew over the keyboard, his tech-savvy generation navigating the system with intuitive ease. There's so much here, he murmured. Financial records, emails, surveillance. Wait, what's this? He clicked on a folder labeled Citadel. A video file appeared on screen. Howard Stark Jr.'s face filled the monitor. A younger version of Peter, with the same serious eyes and thoughtful expression. The timestamp showed a date one day before his supposed death. If you're watching this, I'm already dead, Howard Jr. began, his voice sending a visible shock through Peter. The evidence I've compiled implicates board members Lawrence Pierce and James Stark in illegal weapons sales to blacklisted nations through a shell corporation called Citadel Enterprises. The transactions were approved by my father, whether knowingly or through manipulation of his trust. I'm not yet certain. Peter's hand covered his mouth as his father continued speaking from beyond the grave. What began as financial irregularities led me to something far worse. Citadel isn't just selling weapons. They're developing experimental bioweapons designed to target specific genetic markers. The potential for ethnic-specific biological warfare is not theoretical. It's actively being tested. Howard Jr. looked directly into the camera, his expression grim. Victoria discovered my investigation. I believe she would support exposing this atrocity. Instead, he faltered, raw pain crossing his face. Instead, she revealed that she's been part of Citadel from the beginning. That our relationship was orchestrated to gain access to Stark Industries technology. Eliza placed a steadying hand on Peter's shoulder as the revelation hit him. But the worst betrayal, Howard Jr. continued, came when I learned from medical tests that Victoria and I share a father, that our child carries the genetic consequences of that truth. Whether my father knew of Victoria's parentage when he opposed our marriage, I don't know. But I now believe Victoria knew everything when she pursued me. Howard Jr. leaned closer to the camera. If something happens to me, protect my son. He's innocent in all this. And whoever finds this, trust no one, especially within the family. Citadel has infiltrated every level of Stark Industries. The video continued, where the previous version had ended. What began as a weapons program has evolved into something far more insidious. Citadel isn't just seeking profit. They're developing technology to control the very future of humanity. Their bioweapons program is Phase 1, targeted depopulation of regions rich in natural resources. Phase 2 involves neural reprogramming of survivors using technology derived from my own research on brain-computer interfaces. Peter's face drained of color as his father continued. The stakes aren't measured in dollars, but in lives, potentially billions. This is targeted cleansing and enslavement on a global scale, packaged as strategic resource acquisition and societal stability to their government partners. Victoria isn't just a willing participant. She's driven by a belief that a controlled population reduction is necessary for human survival. It's eugenics disguised as environmental salvation. Howard Jr. looked directly into the camera, his expression grim. Victoria discovered my investigation. I believed she would support exposing this atrocity. Instead, he faltered, raw pain crossing his face. Instead, she revealed that she's been part of Citadel from the beginning, that our relationship was orchestrated to gain access to Stark Industries technology. Daniel's expression hardened as he checked the rearview mirror, because someone told him exactly where we'd be. Before Eliza could process his meaning, Daniel pulled a gun from beneath his seat, pointing it directly at her. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, but Citadel's reach extends further than you know. Yet something in his eyes contradicted his words. A barely perceptible signal, a deliberate intensity that seemed to be communicating something beyond his threat. The way he held the gun, professionally, but with his finger distinctly alongside the trigger rather than on it, struck her as odd for someone of his training. You were working for them all along, Eliza realized, the betrayal hitting her like a physical blow. Edward's text to you after the will reading was intercepted, Daniel confirmed. The real Daniel Draper has been dead for 3 years. I was assigned to monitor Howard Sr. when Citadel realized he was getting too close to the truth. Peter lunged forward from the back seat. But you saved us at the bridge. Why go through all of this if you were just going to turn us in? Daniel's eyes flickered to the rearview mirror again, checking the positions of the SUVs surrounding them. Because we needed to know what Howard Jr. had documented and who else knew about it. His gaze met Eliza's briefly, with an intensity that seemed to be trying to communicate something beyond his words. Dr. Simmons, for instance. She was picked up an hour after leaving the cabin. Peter's face drained of color. You used us to lead you to everyone who knew the truth. And to recover the evidence, Daniel added, reaching for the flash drive in Peter's hand. In that moment, Eliza made her decision. With a swift movement born from years of self-defense classes Howard had insisted she take, she struck Daniel's gun hand, sending the weapon clattering. Peter immediately grabbed the drive and thrust open the van side door, tumbling into the street. Run! Eliza shouted, grappling with Daniel as armed men converged on the van. Peter hesitated only a second before sprinting away, the precious drive clutched in his hand. 2 operatives broke off to pursue him, but the crowded New York street offered countless places to disappear. Daniel overpowered Eliza with practiced efficiency, pinning her against the seat as the van door was wrenched open by Citadel operatives. I really am sorry, he said, something like genuine regret in his eyes. Howard was right about one thing. You are the strongest person in the Stark family. As they dragged her from the van, Eliza caught a final glimpse of Peter vanishing into the crowd. At least he had escaped with the evidence. At least one of them still had a chance. The last thing she saw before a hood was pulled over her head was James Stark approaching, his face impassive as he gave the order. Take her to the sanctuary. Victoria wants to deal with this herself. The hood was removed from Eliza's head with a rough jerk, leaving her blinking against harsh fluorescent light. Her wrists burned from the plastic restraints, binding her to a metal chair bolted to the floor. The room was clinical, white walls, gleaming equipment, and the unmistakable antiseptic smell of a medical facility. The sanctuary. I always knew you'd be trouble, Victoria Pierce said, stepping into Eliza's line of sight. She wore a white lab coat over her designer dress, her perfect manicure tapping against a tablet as she reviewed information. Howard should have sent you away when he had the chance. Eliza tested her restraints. No give. Like you sent your husband away? Or should I say, your half-brother? Victoria's carefully composed expression flickered. So you found the files. Unfortunate, but ultimately irrelevant. Peter won't get far with that drive. He's smarter than you think. He's a child, Victoria dismissed. A genetically compromised child, at that. My greatest disappointment. She set the tablet down and moved closer, studying Eliza with clinical detachment. You, on the other hand, have exceeded expectations. From housemaid to corporate spy in 3 days. I'm almost impressed. I was never just a housemaid, Eliza countered. Howard made sure of that. A cold smile curved Victoria's lips. Yes, his secret daughter. The one he hid away while parading me around as his protege. Did you know he brought me into the Stark household when I was 16? My mother had been his mistress for years, one of many. When she died, he felt obligated. So you seduced your half-brother for revenge? I seduced Howard Jr. because Citadel needed access to his research. Victoria's voice remained eerily calm. The fact that we shared a father was incidental, a detail I only confirmed after we were already married. By then, Peter was already conceived. The casual cruelty in her admission made Eliza's stomach turn. You used your own son as a cover. I used everything and everyone available to further our work. Victoria checked her watch impatiently. Speaking of which, it's time you met the man behind Citadel. He's been quite eager to meet you. The door opened, and Lawrence Pierce entered, followed by a team of white-coated technicians wheeling in sophisticated medical equipment. The prodigal daughter, Lawrence greeted her with mock cordiality. Welcome to the family business. Your Citadel, Eliza realized. Not James. Lawrence laughed. James is a useful enforcer. Nothing more. I founded Citadel 20 years ago when Howard Sr. refused to pursue certain profitable avenues of weapons development. Said they were too morally questionable. His contempt was palpable, as if morality has any place in warfare. Victoria directed the technicians to set up their equipment around Eliza. When Lawrence approached me about gaining access to Stark Biotech research, I was happy to assist. Howard Sr. had denied me what was rightfully mine for years, acknowledging me publicly as his daughter. While hiding me completely, Eliza said bitterly, "We have that much in common, at least." "The difference," Victoria replied coolly, "is that I did something about it. I took what I deserved." Lawrence checked the monitors being set up. Howard Jr. complicated things when he discovered our operation. He was always too much like his father, too concerned with ethics. Unfortunately, eliminating him proved impractical, because he was the only one who fully understood the genetic targeting technology. Eliza guessed, piecing together the horrible logic. Precisely. Lawrence seemed pleased by her deduction. His work was revolutionary. Bioweapons that could target specific genetic markers, eliminating enemies while leaving assets untouched. Perfect for modern warfare. Or targeted cleansing, Eliza countered. Lawrence shrugged. Semantics. Victoria prepared a syringe with methodical precision. Howard Jr.'s accident was staged, but the injuries were real. We've kept him in a semi-conscious state, using various chemical compounds to extract his cooperation when needed. For 17 years, Eliza whispered, horror washing through her. His own wife and uncle, torturing him for corporate profit. For scientific advancement, Victoria corrected. And national security. Our defense contracts are quite lucrative. And Howard Sr., did he know his son was alive? Lawrence exchanged a glance with Victoria. Not until recently. After all these years, Howard Jr. managed to get a message to his father, We still don't know how. Once Howard Sr. started investigating, we had to accelerate our timeline. So you poisoned him, Eliza said. Your own father. He was becoming a liability, Victoria replied without emotion. And he made a critical mistake by changing his will, bringing you into the open. A technician approached with a tray of medical instruments. Lawrence selected what looked like a neural scanner, turning it over in his hands thoughtfully. Now we come to why you're here, Elizabeth, he said. Howard Jr.'s latest breakthrough involves neural patterns, specifically how to map and potentially transfer consciousness. His research indicates that close genetic relatives share complementary neural pathways. The implications sent ice through Eliza's veins. You want to use me to access his mind? Smart girl, Lawrence approved. Yes. With you as a bridge, we can finally extract the complete formula he's been withholding, even under extreme duress. I won't help you, Eliza stated flatly. Victoria approached with the filled syringe. Cooperation isn't required, just consciousness. As she moved to inject Eliza, an alarm suddenly blared throughout the facility. Lawrence cursed, grabbing a security phone on the wall. What's happening? He demanded. The response made his face darken. How is that possible? Lock down the entire East Wing immediately. Victoria lowered the syringe, tension visible in her posture. What is it? Somehow, Howard Jr. has escaped his containment room, Lawrence snapped. Security found his guards unconscious and the monitoring equipment disabled. Hope flickered in Eliza's chest. Looks like my brother is smarter than you thought. Lawrence struck her across the face, his control finally cracking. This facility is a fortress. He won't get far. Take her to the secure holding cell, Victoria instructed the guards. We'll proceed with the neural mapping once Howard Jr. is recaptured. As they wheeled Eliza's chair from the room, the facility descended into chaos. Security personnel rushing through corridors, emergency protocols being announced over the PA system. Through a window, she glimpsed what appeared to be a medical campus surrounded by forest, far from any visible civilization. They secured her in a windowless cell, transferring her from the chair to a hospital bed with built-in restraints. Once alone, Eliza tested each strap methodically, searching for any weakness. Finding none, she forced herself to remain calm, to think. Hours passed. The alarms eventually silenced, replaced by an ominous quiet. Eliza dozed fitfully, exhaustion finally overcoming her fear. She awoke to the soft sound of the cell door unlocking. A gaunt man in a patient's gown stood in the doorway, his once handsome face now hollow and lined with suffering. Though age beyond his years, his eyes, Howard's eyes, Peter's eyes, were sharp with intelligence and purpose. Elizabeth, he whispered, his voice rough from disuse. I've been waiting a long time to meet my sister. Howard Stark Jr. moved to her bedside with the careful movements of someone whose body had endured unspeakable trauma. His hands trembled as he worked to unfasten her restraints. How did you find me? Eliza asked, her voice catching. I've been planning my escape for months, he explained, freeing her wrists. When I heard guards talking about Howard Stark's daughter being brought in, I knew it was time. I've been monitoring this facility's systems from my room. They thought their drugs kept me compliant, but I built a tolerance years ago. Once freed, Eliza embraced her brother instinctively. He stiffened at the human contact before slowly relaxing into it. Peter, she said urgently, your son, he escaped with the evidence. He knows you're alive. A complex emotion crossed Howard Jr.'s face. Hope, pain, fear. My son, is he? He's brilliant, Eliza assured him. And he's fighting for you. Howard Jr. pulled back, urgency returning. We have minutes at most before they discover I'm here. There's something you need to know about Citadel's true purpose. He pulled Eliza close, whispering rapidly in her ear. With each word, her blood ran colder. That's why Victoria kept Peter close all these years, he concluded. Not maternal instinct. He's the final test subject. The perfect genetic bridge. Before Eliza could absorb the full horror of his revelation, the door burst open. Daniel Draper stood in the entrance, gun raised. Step away from her, Howard, he ordered. Howard Jr. moved protectively in front of Eliza. Another Citadel puppet. Daniel's expression was unreadable. You have no idea what's really happening here. I think I do, Howard Jr. countered. You've been hunting my son to complete Victoria's experiment. Peter was never the target, Daniel said, his voice low. He was the bait. Confusion flickered across Howard Jr.'s face. What are you talking about? Citadel doesn't want Peter, Daniel explained, keeping his gun trained on them. They want you, both of you, together. The neural bridge requires both siblings. His eyes met Eliza's. That's why I let Peter escape with the evidence. To draw out the only person who could help him, the real Daniel Draper. Eliza's mind raced to catch up. The real Daniel? But you said. I said what they needed to hear. Daniel cut her off, glancing toward the corridor. Security cameras are looped for 3 minutes. We need to move now if we're going to get out of here. Howard Jr. remained skeptical. Why should we trust you? Because I've spent 3 years undercover in Citadel, working to bring them down, Daniel replied. Howard Sr. knew. It's why he named me in his letter to Eliza. He was signaling that the real Daniel was still his ally, not the man who'd supposedly replaced me. You've been a double agent all along, Eliza realized. Daniel nodded. And our extraction window is closing. The real team is waiting, but we need to move now. Howard Jr. hesitated, then nodded. Where's Victoria? In the East Wing, coordinating the search for you, Daniel said, handing Howard Jr. a security badge. This will get us to the service elevator. They moved swiftly through the sterile corridors, Daniel leading them through a carefully planned route to avoid security. Howard Jr. struggled to keep pace, his body weakened from years of captivity and experimentation. Almost there, Daniel murmured as they approached the service area. They turned a corner and found James Stark waiting with 4 armed guards. I'm disappointed, Draper, James said conversationally. I actually believed your commitment to Citadel was genuine. Daniel raised his weapon, but one of the guards fired first, a tranquilizer dart that struck him in the shoulder. He collapsed within seconds. Family reunion cut short, James commented, gesturing for his men to restrain Eliza and Howard Jr. Victoria will be pleased we caught both of you together. Saves time on the neural mapping procedure. As they were forced to their knees, Howard Jr. caught Eliza's eye. I'm sorry, he whispered. I thought I could save you. You still can, she whispered back. Peter has the evidence. He'll find help. James laughed coldly. Peter Pierce? The boy who just surrendered himself at our front gate to save his aunt. Horror flooded through Eliza as Peter was led into the corridor, hands bound behind his back, a bruise darkening his cheek. I couldn't let them hurt you, he told Eliza, his young face etched with anguish. Not after everything you've done for me. Howard Jr. stared at his son in person for the first time since Peter was an infant. You look like your grandmother, he said softly. Peter's eyes widened in recognition. Dad, the moment of reunion was cruelly brief. Victoria appeared, her lab coat exchanged for a sleek executive suit, her expression triumphant. Perfect, she declared, surveying the captured family. Father, daughter, son, 3 generations of Stark genetic material, all ready for the final phase of Project Lazarus. You won't get away with this, Peter spat. I made copies of everything. I sent them to the FBI, to journalists. Victoria's smile didn't waver. No, you didn't. You came straight here because Draper's GPS tracker led you to us. So impulsive, so emotional, just like your grandfather. She turned to Lawrence, who had joined them in the corridor. Prepare the neural mapping chamber for all 3 subjects. We'll begin the consciousness transfer protocol at dawn. As guards dragged them away in different directions, Eliza caught a final glimpse of Daniel's seemingly unconscious form being carelessly hauled aside. But just before the doors closed between them, she saw his finger tap twice against the floor, the signal they had established in the van. He was still conscious, still fighting. It wasn't much, but in the darkest moment of her life, that tiny gesture was enough to keep hope alive. Because Eliza Wilson, Elizabeth Stark, had spent her entire life being underestimated, and she wasn't about to stop fighting now. The neural mapping chamber resembled something from a nightmare, a sterile white room dominated by 3 reclining medical chairs arranged in a triangle, each bristling with monitoring equipment and neural interfaces. Overhead, a massive apparatus hung, suspended, its multiple articulated arms ending in precision instruments designed to access the deepest recesses of the human mind. Eliza fought against the orderlies as they strapped her into one of the chairs, securing neural sensors to her temples and forehead. Across the room, Peter was similarly restrained, while Howard Jr., weakened by years of captivity, offered only token resistance. "The procedure is quite fascinating," Lawrence explained, moving between them with the enthusiasm of a professor at a lecture. "We'll create a neural bridge between father and daughter first. Your shared genetic markers make you ideal conduits. Then we'll integrate Peter's consciousness as the control subject." "For what purpose?" Howard Jr. demanded, his voice stronger than his body. "You already have my research." "Incomplete research," Lawrence corrected. "You've kept the core algorithm from us, even under persuasive methods. But with Elizabeth as a bridge and Peter as an anchor, we'll extract everything directly from your subconscious." Victoria monitored the equipment calibration, her movements precise and efficient. "Neural mapping initiating in 3 minutes," she announced. "You're insane," Eliza spat. "You can't possibly believe this will work." "It will work," Victoria replied with absolute conviction, "because Howard Jr. designed it to work. His breakthrough in neural interface technology is what made Citadel possible in the first place." Howard Jr. looked away, shame evident on his gaunt face. "I never intended it for this. It was meant to help locked-in syndrome patients communicate. Visionaries rarely anticipate all applications of their work," Lawrence said dismissively. "Fortunately, those of us with broader perspectives can see the full potential." As technicians made final adjustments, the facility's lights suddenly flickered, then stabilized. A moment later, a distant alarm sounded. Lawrence frowned. "What now?" Victoria checked a security monitor. "Perimeter breach on the east wing. Security is responding." She tapped her earpiece. "James, report." Whatever response she received made her expression tighten. "Impossible. He's been neutralized." "Who's been neutralized?" Eliza asked, hope flickering to life. "No one of consequence," Victoria snapped, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. She turned to Lawrence. "We need to accelerate the procedure." The neural mapper hummed to life, its articulated arms beginning to lower toward the 3 Starks. Eliza strained against her restraints, feeling the cool metal of the neural interfaces pressing against her skin. Beside her, Peter's eyes were wide with terror. "Peter," Howard Jr. called to his son, "focus on something they can't take from you. A memory, a feeling, something that's yours alone." The boy nodded, understanding dawning despite his fear. He closed his eyes, concentration evident on his young face. "Neural synchronization at 30%, a technician announced. Proceeding to Phase 2. Another alarm joined the first, this one more urgent. The lights flickered again, longer this time. "Backup generators engaged," someone called out. Victoria's composure was cracking. "Lawrence, we need to." The doors to the neural mapping chamber burst open. Daniel Draper stood in the entrance, blood streaming from a cut above his eye, gun raised. Behind him were a dozen armed operatives in tactical gear. "Federal agents," Daniel shouted. "Everyone on the ground now." Chaos erupted. Lawrence lunged for an emergency button, only to be tackled by one of the agents. Victoria reached for a weapon concealed in her lab coat, but Daniel was faster, disarming her with practiced efficiency. "Victoria Pierce, Lawrence Pierce, you're under arrest for conspiracy, kidnapping, illegal human experimentation, and the murder of Howard Stark Sr., Daniel announced, his voice carrying the authority of his true identity. "The facility is surrounded. Citadel is finished." As agents secured the room, Daniel moved quickly to release Eliza from the neural interface. "You really are a double agent," she breathed as he removed her restraints. "Triple agent, technically," he replied with grim humor. "CIA Counterterrorism Division. We've been tracking Citadel for years, but could never get close enough until Howard Sr. contacted me. But at the van, you had a gun on me. Daniel freed her completely before moving to Peter. Had to make it convincing for the surveillance team tracking us. The only way to bring down the entire operation was to let them think they'd won, to get inside the facility. You used us as bait, Eliza realized, rubbing her wrists. I protected you as much as possible, Daniel countered, helping Peter sit up as the neural sensors were removed. And your nephew here figured out the ruse faster than expected. Peter managed a weak smile. The real Daniel wouldn't have held his gun like that, with his finger off the trigger. Grandfather made me take tactical training last summer. Once Peter was free, Daniel moved to Howard Jr., carefully removing the more extensive neural equipment attached to the weakened man. We need a medical team here immediately, he called to his team. Howard Jr. grasped Daniel's arm with surprising strength. The data, secured, Daniel assured him. Your son managed to upload everything to our secure servers before surrendering himself. Smart kid. Takes after his father, Eliza said, moving to support Howard Jr. as he struggled to stand. Across the room, Victoria was being handcuffed, her perfect composure finally shattered. Her eyes locked with Peter's across the chaos. Mother and son, connected by blood, but separated by an unbridgeable moral chasm. You don't understand what you've done, she said, her voice breaking. The project could have saved humanity from itself by deciding who deserves to live. Peter replied, his young voice steady with conviction. That's not salvation, Mother. That's playing God. Victoria's face crumpled, something almost like maternal pride flashing through her despair. You sound just like your father. As agents led Victoria and Lawrence away, Howard Jr. leaned heavily on Eliza, his body trembling with the effort of standing. Elizabeth, he said softly, I wanted to meet you for so long. We have time now, she assured him, supporting his weight. All the time you need to recover. Peter approached hesitantly, still struggling to reconcile the father he'd mourned with the broken man before him. Dad, are you be okay? Howard Jr. reached out a shaking hand to touch his son's face. I will be now. The reunion Eliza had never dared hope for was unfolding before her eyes. Father and son, brother and sister, a family fractured by secrets and betrayal beginning the long process of healing. Daniel approached, his expression softening as he watched them. Medical evacuation is standing by. We need to get Howard Jr. to a hospital immediately. As they made their way through the facility, now swarming with federal agents, Eliza took in the full scope of Citadel's operation. Laboratories filled with experimental bioweapons. Rooms of supercomputers processing genetic algorithms. Documentation of experiments too horrific to contemplate. How big was this conspiracy? She asked Daniel as they reached the main entrance. International, he replied grimly. Victoria and Lawrence were just the American arm. We've coordinated raids in 12 countries today, taking down the entire network simultaneously. Outside, the morning sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the sprawling grounds of the sanctuary. Medical personnel rushed forward with a gurney for Howard Jr., who insisted on keeping hold of Peter's hand as they transferred him. Will we be safe now? Eliza asked, watching as her newfound family was loaded into a medical helicopter. Daniel's expression was serious, but no longer guarded. Victoria had powerful allies who may not be captured in today's operation. Until we're certain everyone involved has been identified, you and your family will remain under protection. My family, Eliza repeated, the words strange and wonderful on her tongue. After all these years of serving the Starks, I never imagined I would truly be one of them. You were always a Stark, Daniel said. Howard Sr. knew it. It's why he trusted you with what mattered most to him, his grandson's safety. The helicopter's engines roared to life. Daniel guided Eliza toward it, his hand steady at the small of her back. There will be statements to make, testimony to give. The legal battle over Stark Industries will be complex. But for now, you should be with your brother and nephew. They need you. As Eliza climbed aboard, Peter reached out to take her hand, his eyes bright with tears and something like hope. Beside him, Howard Jr. managed a weak smile that transformed his haggard face, revealing the man he had once been, would be again with time and care. Elizabeth, Howard Jr. said as the helicopter lifted off, rising above the nightmare of the sanctuary. Thank you for watching over my son all these years. Eliza squeezed Peter's hand, feeling the weight of servitude falling away with each passing moment. He watched over me too. We protected each other. As the facility receded beneath them, Eliza gazed at the horizon, not as a maid, not as a servant, but as Elizabeth Stark, finally stepping into the light after a lifetime in the shadows. The invisible woman had been seen at last, and the true inheritance Howard Stark had left her wasn't his fortune, but the family she'd found in the darkness. 6 weeks later, Eliza stood at the window of Howard Jr.'s hospital room at the Mayo Clinic, watching autumn leaves dance across the manicured grounds. Her brother's recovery had been slower than anyone hoped. 17 years of captivity and experimentation had taken a devastating toll on his body. But his mind remained brilliant, his spirit unbroken. Behind her, Peter sat beside his father's bed, their heads bent together over a tablet, displaying complex neural interface schematics. Howard Jr. guiding his son through the ethical applications of the technology that Citadel had perverted. If we reconfigure the neural pathway here, Peter suggested, his finger tracing a pattern on the screen, we could help stroke victims recover speech without risking memory access. Howard Jr. nodded, pride evident in his gaunt face. Exactly what I was thinking. You have a natural intuition for this. Eliza smiled at their interaction, these precious moments of normalcy amid the ongoing storm. Outside this protected sanctuary, the world was still reeling from the Citadel revelations. International arrests continued daily as the conspiracy's full reach became apparent. Victoria and Lawrence remained in federal custody, denied bail due to the severity of their crimes and their extensive international connections. A soft knock interrupted the family moment. Daniel entered, his usual tactical attire replaced by a tailored suit that marked his transition from undercover operative to public-facing federal liaison. The board meeting is in an hour, he reminded Eliza gently. The car's waiting whenever you're ready. Eliza nodded, smoothing down her own impeccably tailored suit. Navy blue, understated but unmistakably powerful. No longer the uniform of service, but of authority. Are you sure you're ready for this? Howard Jr. asked, concern evident in his voice. The board won't surrender control easily, especially with James still missing. James Stark had vanished during the raid on the sanctuary, evading the federal dragnet that had captured Victoria and Lawrence. His disappearance remained a troubling loose end, a potential threat still lurking in the shadows. I've been preparing for this moment my entire life, Eliza replied with quiet confidence. Even when I didn't know it. Peter stood, straightening his own suit jacket. At 17, he looked older than his years, the recent weeks having accelerated his journey from boy to man. I should be there too. It's my inheritance as much as yours. Howard Jr. reached for his son's hand. Your place is in the labs and classrooms, learning everything you can, not in boardrooms fighting corporate wars. Let Eliza handle this battle. Trust her as I do. The young man hesitated, then nodded. And Eliza, he said, the title still new, but increasingly natural on his lips, make them understand what Stark Industries should be. What Dad always meant it to be. She crossed the room to kiss the top of Peter's head, then squeezed her brother's shoulder. I'll be back tonight with news of our victory. Rest, both of you. As Eliza and Daniel walked the secure corridor toward the exit, he briefed her on the latest developments. The SEC investigation has frozen most of the board members' assets. They're scared, defensive, and looking for someone to blame. Perfect, Eliza replied. Fear makes people sloppy. Daniel's lips curved in appreciation. Howard Sr. was right about you. You understand power better than those born to it. I understood it because I watched it from below. The view's quite different from there. Outside, an armored SUV waited, 2 federal agents standing at attention. The Stark family remained under protection until all Citadel operatives were apprehended, particularly James. The drive to Stark Tower passed in focused silence, Eliza reviewing her strategy for the confrontation ahead. After years of invisibility, of careful observation, she understood the board members' weaknesses, their biases, their secrets. Knowledge was her weapon, and today she would wield it without mercy. Stark Tower rose before them, its sleek architecture unchanged, yet somehow different now that she approached it not as a servant, but as an owner. "Ready?" Daniel asked as they pulled into the private executive garage. Eliza nodded, gathering her leather portfolio. "Stay close. If James is going to make a move, it will be today." The executive elevator whisked them to the top floor, where Eliza was greeted by Edward Rochester's replacement, a sharp-eyed young attorney named Claire Hammond who had been untainted by Citadel's influence. "They're all assembled in the boardroom," Claire informed her, falling into step beside them. Nervous, hostile, and thoroughly uncooperative. The SEC representative is present as well. "Perfect," Eliza said again, striding purposefully toward the imposing double doors of the Stark Industries boardroom. When she entered, 12 pairs of eyes turned to her, some curious, most hostile. These men and women had known her for years, but never truly seen her. To them, she had been furniture, background, invisible. Now, she commanded the room by her presence alone. "Gentlemen, ladies," she greeted them, moving to the head of the table, Howard Sr.'s old seat. "Thank you for making time for this emergency session." Richard Thornton, the elderly CFO who had served alongside Howard Sr. for decades, cleared his throat. "Ms. Wilson." "Stark," she corrected smoothly. "Elizabeth Stark. Though you may remember me as the woman who served your coffee for the past 20 years. Uncomfortable glances were exchanged around the table. "Ms. Stark," Thornton amended, "while we appreciate the extraordinary circumstances surrounding recent events, this board cannot simply surrender control of a multi-billion-dollar corporation based on a contested will and DNA test. The shareholders are quite concerned about the company's unwitting involvement in a global conspiracy," Eliza interrupted, opening her portfolio. "Which brings us to the purpose of today's meeting." She distributed documents around the table. "This is not a negotiation about control of Stark Industries. This is your opportunity to cooperate with federal authorities and the independent counsel investigating Citadel's infiltration of this company." The SEC representative, a stern woman in her 50s, nodded in confirmation. "The Department of Justice has authorized me to offer limited immunity to board members who fully cooperate with our investigation." "And if we decline?" asked Martin Reynolds, the head of international operations, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. Eliza met his gaze directly. "Then you will be investigated individually for potential complicity in Citadel's activities. The choice is yours." Reynolds paled slightly. "This is extortion." "This is justice," Eliza countered. "Citadel used Stark Industries' resources to develop weapons of mass destruction designed for targeted cleansing. People died. My father was murdered. My brother was tortured for 17 years. And some of you," her gaze swept the room, "knew or suspected and remained silent." Silence fell over the boardroom, heavy with guilt and fear. "Now," Eliza continued, her voice steady, "I am prepared to lead this company forward, to restore its reputation and redirect its resources toward the ethical innovation Howard Jr. always envisioned. But I will do so with a clean house." She gestured to Claire, who distributed another set of documents. "These are the terms of transition. Those who sign will retain their positions pending the outcome of the investigation. Those who refuse will be asked to resign immediately." The board members exchanged uneasy glances, but one by one, they began to review the documents. The atmosphere in the room shifted from hostility to resignation as the reality of their situation became clear. As pens began to scratch across paper, Daniel's hand suddenly moved to his earpiece, his posture stiffening. He moved swiftly to Eliza's side. "Security breach in the building," he murmured in her ear. "Multiple armed individuals entering through the service entrance. James has been spotted." Eliza's heart raced, but her expression remained composed. "How long?" "Minutes at most. Backup is en route, but—" The boardroom doors burst open. James Stark stood in the entrance, flanked by 4 armed men in tactical gear. His usual immaculate appearance had given way to something harder, more desperate. "Family reunion without me. Cousin," he said, his voice deceptively casual as he trained a gun on Eliza. "I'm hurt." The board members froze in shock. Daniel positioned himself partially in front of Eliza, his own weapon drawn. "It's over, James," Daniel stated calmly. "The building is surrounded. Citadel is finished." James laughed, the sound harsh and brittle. "Citadel is an idea, Agent Draper. Ideas don't die so easily." His gaze shifted to Eliza. "Victoria was right about you. The quiet ones, watching from the corners, they're always the most dangerous." "What do you want, James?" Eliza asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "What's rightfully mine," he snarled, all pretense of civility vanishing. "Howard promised me leadership of Stark Industries 20 years ago, before his precious son started asking uncomfortable questions. Before you emerged from the shadows." Understanding dawned on Eliza. "You were the one who arranged Howard Jr.'s accident, not Victoria or Lawrence. They provided the technical expertise. I provided the opportunity." James's expression darkened. Howard Jr. was weak, too idealistic for the real world. Victoria understood the necessary sacrifices for progress. "A targeted cleansing isn't progress," Eliza countered. "It's monstrous." "It's efficient," James corrected. "And now you're going to transfer control of Stark Industries to me, or I'll finish what I started with Howard Jr., this time with his son." The threat against Peter sent ice through Eliza's veins. "Peter is under federal protection." "Yes, at the Mayo Clinic." James smiled coldly. "Where my team is currently bypassing security. Unless I make a call in the next 5 minutes, your newly discovered nephew will join his grandfather." Eliza exchanged a glance with Daniel, whose expression remained professionally neutral even as his mind clearly raced through options. "The transfer documentation is on the table," Eliza said, gesturing to the papers the board had been signing. "I'll need to authorize it." James nodded to one of his men, who collected the documents and brought them to Eliza. "Sign." As she reached for a pen, Eliza's mind flashed back to all the years she had spent observing from the shadows, learning the rhythms of power, the weaknesses of the mighty. She had served these people coffee, emptied their trash, dusted their offices, all while they discussed business they thought she couldn't possibly understand. They had never seen her, but she had seen everything. "You know, James," she said conversationally as she uncapped the pen, "your father had the same tell when he was bluffing in poker. That little muscle that twitches in your left cheek." Confusion flickered across James's face. "What are you talking about?" "You're lying about Peter," she said with absolute certainty. "There's no team at Mayo. You lost most of your operatives in the sanctuary raid, and the few who escaped have already been apprehended. You're alone, desperate, and out of options." James's expression hardened, the muscle in his cheek indeed twitching. "You're gambling with your nephew's life." "No," came a new voice from behind James. "She's stalling for time." James whirled to find Peter standing in the doorway, flanked by federal agents with weapons drawn. The young man's expression was remarkably composed as he faced his would-be killer. "Hello, Uncle James," Peter said coolly. "Looking for me?" James's shock gave Daniel the opening he needed. In one fluid motion, he disarmed the distracted man, forcing him to his knees while federal agents swarmed the room, subduing James's remaining men with efficient precision. As James was handcuffed, his cold composure finally shattered. "This isn't over," he spat. "Citadel has resources you can't imagine, people in positions you'd never suspect." "Maybe," Peter acknowledged, stepping fully into the room. "But they don't have what we have." "And what's that?" James sneered. Peter looked at Eliza, a smile touching his lips. "A family that refuses to be broken." As James was led away, the boardroom erupted in confused chatter. Eliza moved swiftly to Peter, checking him for any sign of harm. "What are you doing here?" "You're supposed to be with your father at the clinic." Peter grinned, the expression momentarily returning him to the teenager he was supposed to be. "Dad and I figured James would make a move today, so we set a trap." "We?" Eliza asked. "Howard Jr.'s idea," Daniel explained, holstering his weapon. He predicted James would target Peter as leverage, so he created a controlled scenario. Let James think he had an opportunity while keeping Peter secure. You used my nephew as bait. Eliza's protective instincts flared. I volunteered, Peter insisted. Dad and I both did. It was time to stop hiding and start fighting back. Looking into his determined eyes, so like her brother's, so like her own, Eliza recognized the stark stubbornness that ran through all their veins. Your father is going to hear about this, she warned, though her tone lacked real anger. Peter's expression sobered. There's something else you should know. The real reason we acted today. He pulled out his phone, showing her a news alert. Rosalind Stark Hamilton was found dead in her Paris apartment this morning. Apparent suicide, but given the circumstances, likely another Citadel cleanup, Daniel finished. Eliza felt a pang for Howard's sister, a complicated woman who had treated her with casual disdain for years, yet another victim of the conspiracy that had devoured their family. Is it over now? She asked Daniel quietly. Truly over. James was the last major Citadel operative still at large, he confirmed. There will be investigations, trials, likely more arrests of minor players. But the organization itself has been dismantled. Eliza turned back to the stunned board members who had witnessed the entire confrontation in paralyzed silence. Gentlemen, ladies, she addressed them with newfound authority. I believe we were discussing the future of Stark Industries. One by one, they signed the transition documents. Their earlier resistance evaporated in the face of what they had just witnessed. By the time federal agents had cleared the room, Eliza Wilson Stark had officially become the chief executive officer of Stark Industries. As the board members filed out, many unable to meet her eyes after years of overlooking her presence, Peter stepped to her side. Dad always said Stark Industries should build things that help people, not weapons that destroy them, he said quietly. Now we can make that happen. Eliza placed her hand on the polished boardroom table. The same table she had dusted countless times, had served coffee at while remaining invisible to those who sat around it. Now it was hers. Not just the table, but everything it represented. Not we, she corrected gently. You, when you're ready. She turned to face her nephew fully. This was never about me taking control, Peter. It was about preserving your inheritance until you can claim it properly. Understanding dawned in Peter's eyes. You're going to be my regent until I finish my education. Eliza nodded. Your father and I discussed it during his recovery. He believes, and I agree, that you need time to become the man you're meant to be without the burden of running a global corporation at 17. And what about you? Peter asked. After spending your life serving others, don't you want something for yourself? The question caught Eliza by surprise. For so long, her identity had been defined by what she did for others, serving, watching, protecting. The concept of wanting something purely for herself was almost foreign. I want to know my brother, she said finally. I want to help him heal. I want to see you grow into the man your father believes you can be. She smiled, the expression transforming her face. And I want to use the resources of Stark Industries to ensure that what happened to our family never happens to anyone else. Daniel, who had been conferring with his agents across the room, approached with respectful professionalism. The building is secure. We should get you both back to the clinic. Howard Jr. will be waiting for news. As they left the boardroom, Eliza paused at the threshold, looking back at the empty table where so many decisions affecting millions of lives had been made, often with casual disregard for the consequences. It will be different now, she promised softly, more to herself than to her companions. We will be different. In the executive elevator, descending to the secure garage, Peter looked at his aunt with newfound respect. The maid who became CEO, grandfather will be proud. No, Eliza corrected with quiet certainty. He would be relieved. Howard spent his life building an empire he didn't know how to control. In the end, he trusted me to fix his mistakes. As they stepped into the waiting SUV, Eliza caught a glimpse of her reflection in the tinted window, no longer the invisible woman in a servant's uniform, but Elizabeth Stark in her rightful place, ready to reshape the legacy that had shaped her. The invisible Maid had vanished forever. In her place stood a woman who would never be overlooked again. 1 year later, Eliza stood on the balcony of the renovated Stark family estate, watching the sunset paint the Hudson Valley in hues of gold and crimson. The property had been transformed, the oppressive darkness of Howard Sr.'s reign replaced by light, openness, and purpose. The East Wing now housed a state-of-the-art rehabilitation center for victims of trauma, while the West Wing had become a research facility dedicated to ethical applications of the neural interface technology that Howard Jr. had pioneered. The main house itself had been redesigned as a true home rather than a mausoleum to wealth and power. The servants' quarters where Eliza had spent most of her life had been converted into guest accommodations for visiting researchers and patients' families. She no longer lived in the shadows. "Beautiful evening," Daniel said, joining her at the balcony rail. After the Citadel case concluded, he had retired from field operations to head the newly formed Tech Ethics Division at the FBI, a position that conveniently allowed him to remain close to the Stark family as their security consultant, and increasingly close to Eliza personally. "Hard to believe it's been a year," she replied, accepting the glass of wine he offered. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I was serving drinks instead of drinking them on this terrace." Daniel's gaze was warm as it rested on her face. "You were never meant to be a servant, Elizabeth. Some people are born to lead, and some are shaped into leaders by circumstance," she countered, their familiar philosophical debate resuming. Nature versus nurture, the eternal question. Speaking of which, Daniel nodded toward the garden below, where Howard Jr. and Peter walked slowly along the stone paths, deep in conversation. "How's he doing today?" Eliza's expression softened as she watched her brother and nephew. Howard Jr.'s physical recovery had been painstaking. 17 years of captivity had left lasting damage that even the best medical care couldn't fully repair. He would always walk with a slight limp, always tire more easily than a man his age should. But his mind remained brilliant, and his spirit grew stronger each day. "The neurologist says he's making remarkable progress," she said. "The nightmares are less frequent. He's able to work for longer periods without exhaustion." She smiled. "And having Peter nearby has been the best medicine of all." Below, Peter was animatedly describing something to his father, his hands moving in enthusiastic gestures. At 18, he had just completed his first year at MIT, balancing his studies with regular visits home to work alongside Howard Jr. in their shared laboratory. The father-son bond that should have developed over a lifetime was being forged in concentrated, precious moments, neither taking for granted the miracle of their reunion. "And what about you?" Daniel asked, his voice gentling. "CEO by day, family guardian by night. When do you take time for Elizabeth?" The question still caught her off guard, even after months of Daniel asking variations of it. The concept of prioritizing her own needs remained foreign after a lifetime of service. "I'm learning," she admitted. Slowly, Daniel's hand covered hers on the railing, warm and steady. "I have infinite patience." Their moment was interrupted by Claire Hammond, now Stark Industries' general counsel, who appeared at the balcony doors. "Ms. Stark, the video conference with the Department of Justice is ready to begin. They've reached a decision on Victoria's plea agreement." Eliza nodded, reluctantly withdrawing her hand from Daniel's. "I'll be right there." In the estate's modernized conference room, the faces of federal prosecutors appeared on screen. The lead attorney wasted no time with pleasantries. "Ms. Stark, we've accepted Victoria Pierce's offer of cooperation in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. She's provided names of Citadel operatives in 6 countries and detailed information on their remaining financial networks." Eliza absorbed this news with complex emotions. Victoria, Peter's mother, Howard Jr.'s tormentor, a woman who had looked through Eliza for 20 years as if she were invisible, would spend the rest of her life in federal custody, but would be spared execution. "Does Peter know?" she asked. "We informed him this morning as the legal guardian of a victim," the prosecutor confirmed. He expressed relief. That didn't surprise Eliza. Despite everything Victoria had done, Peter's relationship with his mother remained complicated by genuine childhood memories of love and care, however performative they might have been on Victoria's part. "There's one more thing," the prosecutor added. Victoria has requested a meeting with you. Not with Howard Jr. or Peter, just you. Eliza's spine stiffened. For what purpose? She wouldn't say. You're under no obligation to agree. After the call ended, Eliza remained seated, contemplating the request. Victoria Pierce had been the architect of decades of suffering for the Stark family. She had manipulated, lied, and killed without remorse in service to her twisted vision of human progress. And yet, you're actually considering it, aren't you? Howard Jr. asked from the doorway, having silently entered during her reverie. Eliza looked up at her brother. The sibling she had known existed, but never met until tragedy forced their paths to cross. I spent my life watching her, she said, observing her moments of strength and weakness, serving her while she never truly saw me. There's a symmetry in facing her now, when our positions are reversed. Howard Jr. moved carefully to sit across from her, his movements measured to manage his chronic pain. You've always seen people more clearly than the rest of us, he said. It's what protected Peter all these years. I couldn't protect you, Eliza said softly, the wound still fresh despite the passing months. No one could have, he assured her. But you helped save what matters most to me, my son. And now my work. He reached across the table, his hands still bearing the scars of his captivity. Whatever you decide about Victoria, I trust your judgment. 3 days later, Eliza sat across from Victoria Pierce in a sterile federal facility meeting room. Victoria's designer clothing had been replaced by a prison uniform, her perfect makeup and manicure now absent. Yet she still carried herself with a regal bearing that had once commanded boardrooms and ballrooms alike. Thank you for coming, Victoria said, her voice lacking its former imperious tone. I almost didn't, Eliza replied honestly. Victoria nodded, accepting this. I wouldn't have in your position. She studied Eliza with new eyes, truly seeing her perhaps for the first time. You look like him, you know. Howard. Around the eyes. So I've been told. An awkward silence fell between them. Two women connected by blood and betrayal, by a man who had failed them both in different ways. I'm not going to apologize, Victoria finally said. What I did, I believed was necessary. I still believe humanity is heading toward catastrophe without intervention. Yet here you are, cooperating with authorities to dismantle the very organization you helped build, Eliza observed. Why? Something flickered across Victoria's face, a complex emotion that might have been regret, might have been resignation. For Peter, she said simply, the geneticists were right about the dangers of consanguinity. He's developing early signs of a degenerative condition that Citadel's research might have treated. But the cost. She looked away. The cost was too high. Understanding dawned on Eliza. You chose your son over your cause. I chose my son over my ambition, Victoria corrected. Perhaps the only maternal instinct I've ever truly felt. She met Eliza's gaze directly. There's a research facility in Switzerland developing treatments for genetic disorders like Peter's. Non-experimental, ethical approaches. I provided all the relevant medical information to his doctors. The revelation that Victoria had been monitoring Peter's health, even from prison, sent a chill through Eliza. Is that why you wanted to see me? To tell me about Peter's condition? Partly, Victoria acknowledged. And to give you this. She slid a small flash drive across the table. Security footage from Howard Sr.'s study, the night before he changed his will to include you. I think you should see it. Eliza pocketed the drive, wary but curious. Why now? Because in the end, we both loved him in our way, Victoria said, and for once, there was no manipulation in her voice, only tired truth. Howard Sr. was a complicated man who hurt everyone who loved him, including you. When Eliza returned to the estate that evening, she retreated to her study, once Howard Sr.'s private domain, now her own sanctuary. With trepidation, she inserted Victoria's flash drive into her secure computer. The footage showed Howard Sr. in his study, older and frilier than she remembered him. He sat at his desk, writing what she recognized as the letter he'd left for her. But he wasn't alone. Standing by the window, watching the old man write was James Stark. She'll never accept it, you know, James was saying on the recording. 23 years as your maid. And suddenly you expect her to take control of your empire? Elizabeth isn't built for power. Howard Sr. looked up, his expression weary but determined. You're wrong about her, James. She understands power better than any of us. She's watched it, studied it, seen how it corrupts from the perfect vantage point. Invisibility. And what about your grandson? Peter deserves his birthright. Peter will have his birthright, Howard confirmed. But not until he's ready. Elizabeth will ensure that. She's the only one who ever truly protected him without agenda. He set down his pen. I made too many mistakes, James. Use people as chess pieces. Elizabeth is my chance to finally do something right. James's expression darkened. You're making a mistake, Uncle. The board won't accept her. The family won't accept her. They'll have no choice, Howard replied. And neither do you. The recording ended there, leaving Eliza with tears streaming down her face. Tears for the complicated, flawed man who had hidden her away, yet in the end, had tried in his imperfect way to make amends. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Peter stood in the doorway, his young face serious. Dad told me about Victoria's request to meet you. Are you okay? Eliza quickly wiped away her tears, beckoning him inside. I'm fine, but we need to talk about your health, Peter. The young man nodded, unsurprised. The Swiss Research Center already contacted me. I've been working with them remotely for the past month. Why didn't you tell me? Eliza asked, hurt that he had kept such a significant concern private. Peter sat across from her, suddenly looking very much like the adult he was becoming. Because you and Dad have sacrificed enough for me. I wanted to handle this on my own. Eliza reached for his hand. That's not how family works, Peter. We face things together, the good and the bad. I'm learning that, he admitted with a small smile. Slowly, his echo of her own words to Daniel made Eliza laugh despite her concern. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both of us trying to carry the world alone. Starks are stubborn that way, came Howard Jr.'s voice from the doorway. He entered slowly, leaning on the cane that had become his constant companion. A family trait I'm afraid we all share. As the three of them talked into the night, about Peter's condition, about treatments, about hopes and fears, Eliza marveled at how far they had come. From strangers connected by blood and secrets to a family forging new bonds of choice and love. Later that week, Eliza stood at the podium in Stark Tower's grand atrium, facing journalists and cameras for the official unveiling of the company's new direction. Behind her, the Stark Industries logo had been redesigned. The aggressive, sharp angles of the original softened into something more organic, more human. For decades, Stark Industries has been at the forefront of technological innovation. She began, her voice steady and clear. Today, we embark on a new chapter, one that places human well-being at the center of everything we do. The assembled press corps watched intently as she outlined the company's dramatic pivot, from weapons and defense contracts to medical technology, sustainable energy, and ethical artificial intelligence. The Stark family has learned through painful experience that technology without compassion, innovation without ethics, can lead to devastating consequences, she continued. We are committed to ensuring that our work serves humanity's highest potential, not its darkest impulses. In the front row, Peter sat beside his father, both men watching with visible pride as Eliza commanded the attention of the global media with the same quiet authority she had once used to manage their household. And now, Eliza concluded, I would like to introduce the future of Stark Industries, our new research and development division, headed by my brother, Howard Stark Jr. A murmur rippled through the crowd as Howard Jr. rose carefully from his seat. This was his first public appearance since his rescue, a calculated risk, but one he had insisted upon taking. As he made his way to the podium, leaning slightly on his cane, the journalists erupted in questions and camera flashes. Howard Jr. raised a hand for quiet, his gaze steady despite the overwhelming attention. Thank you, he said simply. For 17 years, I was denied my voice, my freedom, and my family. I returned to public life with a renewed commitment to ensuring that technology serves humanity, not the other way around. His brief statement complete, Howard Jr. stepped back, allowing Eliza to field the barrage of questions that followed. As the press conference continued, Daniel appeared quietly at Howard Jr.'s side, helping him to a chair when the strain of standing became too much. That evening, the Stark family gathered on the rooftop garden of the tower, a private celebration after the public declaration. Fairy lights twinkled overhead, and soft jazz played from hidden speakers. Howard Jr. sat in a comfortable chair, watching as Peter demonstrated a new neural interface prototype to Claire and the company's chief scientists. "He's remarkable," Howard Jr. said as Eliza joined him. "Everything I hoped he would become, despite everything working against him." "He had you in him all along," Eliza replied. "And now he has you in his life as well." Daniel approached with champagne for the siblings, his hand lingering on Eliza's shoulder in a gesture that had become familiar and welcome over the months. Howard Jr. noted the interaction with a knowing smile. "When are you two going to stop pretending this is just a professional relationship?" he asked bluntly. Daniel laughed. "I've been asking your sister the same question for months." Eliza felt a blush rise to her cheeks, a reaction that still surprised her after years of maintaining perfect composure as a servant in the background of others' lives. "Some transitions take time," she said diplomatically. "Some rewards are worth waiting for," Daniel replied, his gaze warm and patient as it met hers. Howard Jr. cleared his throat. "Well, while you two continue your delicate dance, I have an announcement." He beckoned Peter over. "Son, would you join us?" Peter approached, curiosity evident on his face. "I've decided to accept the Swiss Research Facility's offer," Howard Jr. revealed. "They want me to head their neural regeneration program, and I believe my work there could benefit not just Peter's condition, but thousands with similar genetic challenges." "You're moving to Switzerland?" Eliza asked, surprised and a little hurt at the thought of losing her brother after finding him so recently. "For 6 months initially," Howard Jr. clarified, "and I'd like Peter to join me when his semester breaks allow." He looked at his son. "What do you think?" Peter's expression was thoughtful. "I think it's perfect," he said finally. "Your research, my treatment, and—" He glanced at Eliza. "A chance for Eliza to find her own path without feeling responsible for us every minute." "I don't mind being responsible for you," Eliza protested. "We know," Howard Jr. said gently. "That's why you need space to discover who Elizabeth Stark is beyond being everyone else's guardian angel." Daniel's hand found hers, squeezing gently in silent support. "They might have a point," he murmured. Looking between the 3 men who had become the center of her world, Eliza realized they were right. For her entire life, she had defined herself by her service to others, first as the invisible maid, then as the reluctant heiress protecting her newfound family. Perhaps it was time to discover who she was for herself. 6 months, she agreed, and then we reevaluate. As a family, Howard Jr. echoed, raising his champagne glass in a toast. As they clinked glasses, Eliza looked out over the Manhattan skyline, the city lights reflecting like stars in the gathering dusk. So much had changed in the years since Howard Sr.'s will had shattered her carefully constructed world of invisibility. The maid had become a CEO. The servant had become a leader. The woman who had spent her life watching from the shadows now stood in the light, seen and valued for exactly who she was. "To the future," Daniel said softly beside her. "To choices," Peter added. "To healing," Howard Jr. concluded. Eliza smiled, feeling the final weight of servitude fall away as she embraced not just her name, but her right to determine her own destiny. "To being visible," she said. "Finally, I hope this story touched your heart as much as it did mine. There's something powerful about stepping from invisibility into the light of one's true identity. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had a moment of being truly seen after feeling invisible. Join the Ducal family by subscribing if you'd like more stories of transformation, justice, and the healing power of truth.